In Buddhist practice, there are several important festivals such as the Qingming Festival, Zhongyuan Festival, and Yulanpen Festival, during which offerings are made to ancestors. These acts are filled with reverence, honoring those who came before us. However, many people, even within the Buddhist community, may ask, if our ancestors have already been reincarnated, why do we still worship them? Do they really return to consume the offerings of food, fruits, and incense that we place before them? And perhaps most importantly, how can we truly liberate them from suffering? These questions touch on some of the deepest and most profound teachings of Buddhism. They involve reincarnation, the cycle of birth and death, the nature of offerings, and our responsibility to help all beings find liberation from suffering. These topics are not only philosophical in nature, but also deeply practical for those seeking to understand the true purpose of Buddhist rituals and how they serve to benefit both the living and the deceased. First, it's essential to understand what Buddhism teaches about reincarnation and the cycle of samsara, the endless cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth. According to the Buddha, all beings, human and non-human, are subject to samsara. This cycle continues until one is able to achieve nirvana, which is liberation from the cycle of rebirth. Rebirth does not mean the same life is repeated, but that a being's consciousness is reborn into a new form. In this sense, our ancestors, who have passed on, may have been reborn into different lives, their consciousness having moved on from their physical forms. However, Buddhism also teaches that the process of reincarnation is not linear, and the rebirth of our ancestors does not erase their connection to us. Our ancestors may no longer exist in the same physical form, but their karmic presence remains. In this light, the act of offering to ancestors is not simply an acknowledgement of their former physical existence, but a way to honor the spiritual connection we share through karma. In Buddhist scriptures, it is said that the soul or consciousness does not end with death, but it continues, evolving, reborn in different forms based on the karma accumulated throughout past lives. Therefore, our ancestors, although no longer present in their original physical form, remain connected to us karmically and spiritually. The Buddha's teachings on karma help us understand why we continue to honor our ancestors. Karma refers to the law of cause and effect, which dictates that every action, word, or thought creates an effect, and this effect ripples across time, influencing our current and future lives. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha explains, mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief. They are all mind-wrought. The idea here is that our actions, intentions, and thoughts from past lives shape our present circumstances, including our connections with family members and ancestors. Therefore, when we offer food, incense, and prayers, we are not simply making offerings to the deceased, but also engaging in a practice that strengthens the karmic bond between us and the departed. It is an offering of merit. Merit is a central concept in Buddhist practice. It is the positive energy or spiritual benefit that arises from performing virtuous acts. According to the Mahayana Sutras, performing acts of kindness, generosity, and compassion, even after death, benefits not just the person performing them, but also their ancestors and loved ones. By making offerings, we are helping to generate merit that can uplift the deceased and ease their transition in the cycle of rebirth. This is where the notion of helping our ancestors through offerings comes into play. It is believed that through our good actions and merits, we can assist them in their spiritual journey, possibly alleviating their suffering and aiding their rebirth into better conditions. There is an important distinction between the physical and spiritual aspects of offering in Buddhism. The physical act of placing food, fruit, and incense on an altar is a symbolic gesture. The true offering, according to the Buddha, lies in the intention behind the act. The Buddha's teachings emphasize that it is not the material offerings themselves, but the mental state, the mindfulness and devotion with which they are given, that truly matters. Offering with a pure heart and a genuine wish for the liberation of all beings is what counts. In the Lotus Sutra, Buddha says, "If one makes offerings with an unselfish mind, it will lead to the benefit of both the giver and the receiver, purifying them from the defilements that bind them to samsara." The offerings are not for the ancestors in a material sense, but rather they are a means of generating positive karma, which ultimately helps both the living and the deceased on their journey toward enlightenment. The Buddha's teachings show that the merit from making such offerings benefits all beings, both those who have passed and those still living. This brings us to the question of whether the ancestors actually return to consume the offerings we make during these festivals. From a Buddhist perspective, the offerings themselves are not for the physical consumption of the ancestors. They are symbolic gestures, a representation of our devotion and love. The act of offering is primarily for the living, as it helps us cultivate compassion, gratitude, and mindfulness. For the deceased, these offerings are said to generate merit, which is believed to help them in their spiritual journey, possibly assisting in their liberation from samsara or improving their next rebirth. So when we ask whether our ancestors return to consume the offerings, the answer lies in understanding that the purpose of the offering is not for the ancestors' consumption, but for the merit generated by the act itself. The merit benefits the ancestors and helps guide them through the cycle of reincarnation, while also providing spiritual nourishment to the person making the offering. It is through the intention and act of offering that both the living and the deceased are uplifted. Now let's consider how these offerings help to liberate our ancestors from suffering. According to Buddhist teachings, suffering dukkha is an inherent part of the cycle of samsara, which all beings experience. However, the Buddha offered a path to liberation through the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. By following the path of ethical conduct, mindfulness, and wisdom, one can transcend the suffering of samsara. Through our acts of merit, including offerings, we are participating in this very process of liberation, helping to release our ancestors from the bonds of samsara. The Buddha's teachings on compassion also provide the key to understanding how to help liberate our ancestors. Compassion, or karuna, is the wish for all beings to be free from suffering. It is the understanding that all beings, living or past, are interconnected. In Buddhism, this compassion is not just a feeling, it is a practice. By performing offerings with a compassionate heart, we not only honor our ancestors, but we also help them move closer to liberation. These offerings are acts of merit that benefit both the living and the deceased, bringing them closer to freedom from the suffering of samsara. When we perform acts of generosity, such as offering food, incense, or prayers to our ancestors, we are not simply giving them material gifts. In Buddhism, we believe that merit is created through actions that arise from good intentions. It is through these acts of virtue that we help to alleviate the suffering of our ancestors, allowing them to progress spiritually. The Buddha's teachings on karma help us understand this more deeply. Karma is the law of cause and effect, where every action, thought, and word we express generates energy that shapes our future and the future of others. According to Buddhist scriptures, our ancestors, though reborn into other forms, still retain the consequences of their past actions. Their karma from previous lives affects their current situation, and through the merit we create in our rituals, we offer them a chance for spiritual improvement. The Mahayana Sutras speak about the concept of transfer of merit, which allows us to dedicate the good karma from our virtuous actions to others, including our ancestors. This practice helps uplift them and move them closer to a more favorable rebirth. The offerings made during festivals like Qingming, Zhongyuan, and Yulanpen are not just for the physical consumption of the deceased. The purpose of these offerings is to generate merit and good karma, which can assist our ancestors on their spiritual journey. This merit can ease their suffering, and ultimately, it can help them reach a better rebirth, one that is closer to liberation from the cycle of samsara. But how do we know if our ancestors are truly benefiting from these offerings? The Buddha teaches us that the true benefit of offering lies in the intention behind the act. When we offer with sincerity and devotion, we are not merely performing a ritual. We are cultivating compassion, mindfulness, and wisdom in our hearts. These qualities are what allow us to break free from the cycle of suffering and guide others, including our ancestors, on the same path to liberation. Buddha said in the Dhammapada, "A person is not what they think they are, but what they think is what they become." Our offerings, driven by good thoughts and intentions, create a positive impact on both the giver and the receiver. Additionally, the act of offering during these festivals is not just about giving for the sake of tradition. It serves as a powerful reminder for us to live with awareness of impermanence. One of the fundamental teachings of Buddhism is that all things are impermanent, including our lives and the lives of our ancestors. This awareness of impermanence is what drives us to practice kindness, gratitude, and compassion. By reflecting on the temporary nature of life, we are reminded to live fully in the present moment, to appreciate the time we have with our loved ones, and to offer them the best of our hearts. The Buddha often spoke about the three jewels: the Buddha, the Dharma, the teachings, and the Sangha, the community, as sources of spiritual support. Through our offerings, we connect with these three jewels, strengthening our bond to the Buddha's wisdom, to the Dharma's teachings, and to the Sangha's support. Offering to our ancestors is a way of aligning ourselves with the Buddha's path, creating a positive spiritual environment for both the living and the deceased. Through this practice, we honor our ancestors while also nurturing our own spiritual development. Finally, as we reflect on the purpose of these rituals, we begin to understand that offerings to ancestors are ultimately an act of love, the highest form of compassion in Buddhism. It is through love that we can transcend the ego and the attachment that binds us to samsara. This love manifests in our willingness to help our ancestors, not for their physical satisfaction, but for their spiritual well-being. By offering with a pure heart, we not only help them, but also purify our own hearts, allowing us to progress on the path of enlightenment. Now that we understand the deeper meaning behind these offerings, it's important to remember that this is not just about rituals or ceremonies. It's about embodying the teachings of the Buddha in our daily lives. The Buddha's wisdom on compassion, mindfulness, and generosity is not just to be practiced in special ceremonies, but in every action we take. Whether we are making offerings, interacting with others, or reflecting on the nature of life, we can always strive to embody these qualities. The act of honoring our ancestors through offerings during Buddhist festivals like Qingming, Zhongyuan, and Yulenpen is not only about remembering the past, it is about helping them on their spiritual journey, just as it is about improving our own spiritual progress. These acts of compassion create merit, which benefits both the living and the deceased. They help liberate our ancestors from suffering and move them closer to enlightenment, while also purifying our own hearts and minds. By following the Buddha's teachings of compassion, generosity, and mindfulness, we can bring peace and liberation to all beings, including ourselves. If you found these insights helpful and want to dive deeper into how Buddhist practices can transform your life, we'd love for you to join us on this journey. Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell notification so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for more profound teachings on Buddhist philosophy, rituals, and practices. Together, let's walk the path toward wisdom, compassion, and enlightenment.